Today on Histopedia, we're diving into the life of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., a visionary leader who changed the course of American history. How did he challenge one of the world's most entrenched systems of racial injustice, and what lasting impact did he leave? From landmark protests to powerful speeches, and from personal sacrifice to a monumental legacy, we'll explore the life of a man whose dream of equality still inspires us today. This is the story of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., a man of courage, vision, and commitment to nonviolent resistance. Martin Luther King Jr. was born on January 15, 1929, in Atlanta, Georgia, a time when Jim Crow laws across the South enforced strict racial segregation. This era meant Black Americans were routinely denied basic rights, restricted from white-only schools, neighborhoods, and even public spaces. His father, Martin Luther King Sr., was a pastor and a fierce advocate for racial equality, deeply influencing King's values and future mission. King excelled in school, skipping both the ninth and 12th grades and entering Morehouse College at just 15 in 1944. He later attended Crozer Theological Seminary, where he was elected student body president of a mostly white class and developed his philosophy of nonviolent resistance, inspired by Mahatma Gandhi. In 1955, King completed his PhD in theology at Boston University, becoming Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. In 1954, King became the pastor of Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama. Then, on December 1st, 1955, a pivotal moment occurred. Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat to a white man on a segregated bus. Her arrest ignited the Montgomery Bus Boycott. King, just 26, was chosen to lead the protest. For 381 days, over a year, approximately 40,000 Black residents of Montgomery refused to ride city buses, opting to walk or carpool. The boycott was highly organized, with nightly mass meetings at churches and a network of carpool drivers supporting those who had to travel long distances. The boycott severely impacted the transit system, which lost around 75% of its ridership and thousands of dollars daily. King was arrested, faced harassment, and even had his home bombed. But on November 13th, 1956, the Supreme Court ruled bus segregation unconstitutional. In 1957, King co-founded the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, SCLC, to organize Black churches and communities across the South for civil rights activism. The SCLC advocated for nonviolent resistance as a moral response to unjust laws. King soon traveled more than 780,000 miles to speak and organize in cities across the country. One of the most pivotal campaigns took place in Birmingham, Alabama, in 1963. Birmingham, then known as one of America's most segregated cities, had seen 60 unsolved bombings targeting Black homes and businesses. King and the SCLC organized sit-ins, marches, and boycotts. Over 1,000 students joined, and shocking images of children being hit with fire hoses and attacked by police dogs were broadcast nationwide, stirring public outrage. King was arrested, where he wrote his famous Letter from Birmingham Jail, arguing, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." The Birmingham campaign pressured local leaders to negotiate, and by May, stores and restaurants had agreed to desegregate. Birmingham was a turning point, marking the start of a national reckoning with racial injustice. On August 28, 1963, King co-led the historic March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, bringing together over 250,000 people on the National Mall. It was one of the largest political gatherings in U.S. history, with participants from all races. King delivered his iconic Nodium, "I Have a Dream" speech, where he called for equality and justice in a nation where people will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. His words resonated worldwide and helped build momentum for civil rights legislation. The March on Washington directly influenced the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Signed into law by President Lyndon B. Johnson, this landmark legislation banned discrimination in public places, employment, and education, reshaping the social fabric of America. At just 35, King became the youngest recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize for his dedication to nonviolent activism. In his acceptance speech, he said, "I believe that unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word." In early 1965, King organized the Selma to Montgomery marches to draw attention to voting rights. In many southern counties, black Americans were prevented from voting by impossible literacy tests, poll taxes, and intimidation. Selma, Alabama was chosen because out of 15,000 eligible black residents, only 383 were registered voters. On March 7th, Bloody Sunday, around 600 protesters attempted to march 54 miles to Montgomery but were met with brutal force by state troopers at the Edmund Pettus Bridge. The televised violence shocked the nation, leading President Johnson to propose the Voting Rights Act, which was signed into law on August 6, 1965. As King expanded his focus, he launched the Poor People's Campaign in 1967 to address economic inequality, calling for a multiracial army of the poor to demand better housing, jobs, and living conditions for all Americans. King's opposition to the Vietnam War, announced in a famous speech in 1967, alienated some of his supporters but underscored his commitment to peace and social justice worldwide. On April 3rd, 1968, King traveled to Memphis, Tennessee to support sanitation workers striking for fair wages. That night, he delivered his "I've Been to the Mountaintop" speech, foreshadowing his own death, saying, "I may not get there with you, but we as a people will get to the promised land." Tragically, on April 4th, 1968, King was assassinated on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel at the age of 39. His death led to riots in over 100 American cities, and the loss of King left a void in the civil rights movement. The impact of King's work was profound. The Voting Rights Act led to a surge in black voter registration. In Mississippi alone, the number of black registered voters increased from 6.7% in 1964 to over 59% by 1969. His philosophy of nonviolent resistance influenced civil rights movements worldwide, from South Africa's anti-apartheid efforts to India's fight for Dalit rights. Martin Luther King Jr. Day was established as a federal holiday in 1983, and his legacy is honored through thousands of streets, schools, and memorials bearing his name. Today, his dream of equality continues to challenge us to make justice a reality for all. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the life of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more deep dives into history on Histopedia.